How is the American economy doing? According to the Federal Reserve's latest Beige Book, economic expansion has been moderate and optimism is waning. But what about the CPG industry specifically? If you haven't consumed any of the previous pieces of content in this new series, you might be asking yourself, what the heck is the Federal Reserve Beige Book? And why exactly should you even care about it? The Beige Book is a Federal Reserve System publication about current economic conditions across all 12 Federal Reserve districts. It characterizes regional economic conditions and prospects based on a variety of mostly qualitative information gathered directly from district sources. So why you should care that the Beige Book is collected from mostly qualitative data is that it's much different than most of the government data that we get that's basically quantitative and kind of gives a lot of color. And it's extremely important for CPG brands today because just with a few clicks of your mouse, you're instantly a business that has national distribution, your marketing message gets spread out nationally, and because of that, you might have a misconception that there is a one-size-fits-all approach to the way that your business needs to be run. But this is not the case, especially when you're dealing with a lot of regionality that comes with a global health pandemic like COVID-19 and how those governments are responding. And because the Beige Book looks at all 12 districts and breaks those out, gives you a good amount of detail across different regions in the United States. And since this information is qualitative and regional, you are able to sometimes spot some trends that are happening before they hit some of the other regions, and you can position your business to take advantage of some of those. And the Federal Reserve Beige Book comes out every 45 days. It's a decently sized publication, and because of that, I figured it would be valuable to you guys if I dug through it and pulled out several highlights that was specifically interesting to professionals in the CPG industry. But before I get into those highlights, I did want to kind of give you guys some bonus retail shopping data around the Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday holidays. So on Thanksgiving, we actually had a new record that was set for digital sales, reaching $5.1 billion. And that was a growth of 21.5% year over year. Now, Black Friday, I have two data points coming from private companies. The first one being from Adobe Analytics, and they said the US saw $9 billion in online sales on Black Friday, which is up 21.6% year over year. Now, Salesforce says it was a little bit higher, stating that it brought in $12.8 billion in digital sales, which is up 23% year over year. Now, Cyber Monday, according to Adobe Analytics, they said the online sales holiday brought in $10.8 billion of digital sales, which is up 15.1% year over year. So as you can see overall that the online sales throughout the Turkey 5, I guess you can consider it Thanksgiving Day to Cyber Monday, had produced a really great result from the digital side. Now, there's a lot of refuting data coming from brick and mortar, specifically mall traffic was down somewhere around 50% year over year. And even with the robust digital sales, if you consider all retail sales during the holiday season, they were down a few percentage points. But let's jump into the December 2nd of 2020's Federal Reserve Beige Book. The first district bank that I wanted to highlight was the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank, and they report retail sales appeared to edge lower beginning in late October. Contacts cited rising COVID-19 cases and falling temperatures as contributing factors. Sales held steady for some businesses, but still disappointed since holiday shopping and eating out would typically have begun to boost brick and mortar sales. Prices continued to rise modestly overall. Nearly 40% of the manufacturers reported that prices rose for factor inputs, and none reported a decline, but only about 25% received higher prices for their own products. In turn, about 25% of the non-manufacturers reported that their prices rose for their inputs, but only 10% received higher prices from consumers for their own goods and services, and 6% reported declines. Two things I wanted to give some further context to in the Philadelphia Federal Reserve District's commentary. The first one is that the US economy, and honestly the global economy, is not siloed. When something is happening in one industry, all it takes is the business version of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon for us to notice that there is going to be some issues across industries when one is struggling. And with restaurants being shut down, you can see how people being out and about can affect a lot of the brick and mortar retail sales. The second area that I wanted to give some further context to is that throughout all of the 4 now Beige Book breakdowns that I've done, we've talked about that there has been pricing increases at the input level and how those prices have not been able to necessarily be passed on to the consumer. The consumer right now is very price sensitive. They're dealing with a ton of financial constraints. And because of that, businesses are a little bit gun shy on passing those down. And you're seeing at the manufacturer, the input level, those costs are being passed on in some fraction over to the brands. The brands in some fraction are passing it over to the consumer, but not at the point that makes all of them whole. And you can only hold back that price increase for so long. And eventually the system breaks. And that's kind of where we're at today, and why 2021 is really setting up to be interesting to pay attention to, because consumers, without some fundamental change in the economy, are going to struggle to pay for a lot of these goods when the prices end up having to be increased, or these businesses become bankrupt, and then there's a whole other bunch of problems that happen. The second Federal Reserve Bank district that I wanted to talk about highlights from was the Richmond Federal Reserve Bank. They report retailers saw little change in recent weeks and business remained below year-ago levels. Food retailers continue to see strong demand. Local retailers that also sell online reported solid online sales, while in-store shopper traffic remained low. Retailers worked to restock inventories to prepare for holiday sales, but some contacts reported that delays and shortages were limiting their ability to do so. There's also robust growth in shipping volumes in recent weeks. Contacts reported volumes were up over the year and neared record levels. Import levels continue to exceed export levels, with consumer goods performing particularly strong, but beverage imports were weak. On the export side, meat and grocery products were strong. So Richmond had a few direct references to the grocery CPG industry, all of which were positive as the space continues to outperform many of the other industries. You also saw that exports were strong, which means that a lot of these CPG brands are probably able to further accelerate some of their international growth. And on the flip side of that, you saw at least the call out on beverages that the imports were low on that. And that might indicate a strengthening of this kind of shop local, made in the USA consumer mentality that's going on right now. Now, jumping into the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank, they reported consumer spending and retail sales growing moderately over the reporting period. Growth in e-commerce eased, but continued to register sharp gain from a year earlier. Contacts expected holiday-related spending to increase slightly compared with last year. Consumer prices ticked up, led by higher food prices, and social service organizations reported strong demand for mental health services and financial assistance. Now, I did want to bring up for my supplement industry followers, and this is because a lot of the business is surrounding like milk proteins. Chicago District did note that dairy prices were mixed, but were up over the year, which seems to continue a trend that's been happening throughout the back half of the year. Now, something that I rarely note because of the focused aspect of my channel, that's around the erosion of mental health in the United States. This is just more of like a public service announcement too. Make sure that you're checking on your friends, your family members, your colleagues, A lot of times you see a lot of positive things that are getting shared online, but it's really just a snapshot of your life. So if you're able to check in on people a little bit more and make sure they're doing okay, I think this is probably a really good time to do that, because people are definitely struggling during this time, and a lot of people are at a breaking point. It's not all that talked about in the news, but it really should be, because this is a very dangerous aspect of this COVID-19 effect that we've been dealing with over the last 9 months. The fourth Federal Reserve Bank that I wanted to highlight was coming from Kansas City, and they say that consumer spending and retail sales increased slightly in October, but decreased slightly in November. Despite the drop in retail sales in November, activity remained moderately above year-ago levels. The majority of businesses indicated that developments related to COVID-19 have pushed their firm to either expand, implement for the first time, or create a plan to implement an online business segment. And why I included the Kansas City district is mostly from that latter point around how the COVID-19 effect has pushed a lot of businesses into either starting for the first time or focusing a lot more on the digital channel. And this is maybe a silver lining across 2020, is that a lot of businesses that were not focused on digital now were forced to, and possibly has better prepared them for the future. I don't think anybody can argue that there is a huge digital shift that has been happening and will continue to happen, and it was going to disrupt every single industry in the world. So hopefully this has really kind of kicked a lot of people in the butt to focus on that, realize how important it is for not only today, but in the future. And the last Federal Reserve Bank district that I wanted to talk about was the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank. And they said that retail sales rose notably over the reporting period. Many retailers moved up their holiday marketing by several weeks, and some already benefited from an early start to holiday shopping. Online sales continued to be strong, and demand for food products increased further. However, given the recent rise in COVID-19 cases and stricter containment measures across the district, brick and mortar stores expressed high uncertainty, with many being cautious about stocking up for the holidays. Most retailers expected a big shift to e-commerce to continue this holiday season, while overall sales volume is expected to be flat or slightly lower compared to last year. Several grocers reported intermittent supply issues and low inventories of certain products. I would say across all of the 12 Federal Reserve districts, San Francisco was probably the most upbeat in terms of like consumer spending and retail sales. They also had several references again to the grocery CPG industry, and was an early indicator from a few reports ago talking about supply constraints and the second round of pull forward in terms of buying, and some of the issues you're seeing probably shared across social media with grocery store shelves being stocked out again. But it does seem like that is diminishing a little bit, which is really good news. But things could definitely change at any time depending on how some of the restrictions happen in certain large cities that then ends up getting propagated across the United States, and people kind of create that same frenzy they created before. And there still is a big amount of online positivity, but brick and mortar retail continues to have a ton of uncertainty around their business, and during one of the best periods, usually for most brick and mortar retailers around holidays, they're not able to fully go all in on this period and stock up their shelves and really kind of push forward as strong as they can, because they don't really know what's going to happen. They don't want to push all their chips in yet, because there's still a ton of things that are developing with the COVID-19 pandemic. To conclude this video, I do want to kind of like zoom out and just look at the overall economic commentary that was throughout the December 2nd, 2020 Federal Reserve Beige Book. Throughout the Beige Book, you're seeing that economic activity was really moderate growth over the last reporting period, but optimism has really waned in many of the districts, and they're noting a ton of forward-looking worries that include elevated rate of case counts, mandated restrictions, and a lot of the looming expiration dates with some of the government support and moratoriums on evictions and some of the things with mortgages. Also noted across the districts about how important it is for their businesses, if they can, to offer like virtual work from home type of arrangements because of childcare and school-age children needing to be watched because of the situation with schools being shut down. And this is causing a ton of issues in the workforce, especially from females. And if females are not working, a little bit over 50% of Americans are female, and them not being in the workforce, it causes a ton of problems. Something that's going to be a major point for 2021 to kind of figure out, how do we deal with childcare? A lot of commentary around not being able to pass some of those pricing increases down. That's going to be an issue that we're going to have to address in 2021. A lot of that shit's going to roll downhill, unfortunately, to the consumer, and they're going to need to be ready for those price increases. A lot of the fast-moving consumer goods, consumer packaged goods that is very frequently purchased, are going to be continually increasing. And if e-commerce continues to be the default way of purchasing, there's going to be elevated transportation costs that need to be passed on to consumers. So I'll follow along and see how these things progress over time, but these are some big shocks in the economic system that could cause a ton of problems in 2021. If you have any questions about the economy or this specific Federal Reserve Beige Book, I would love to hear from you in the comments below or reaching out to me on any of my social media networks. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.